Every day, local government makes modern life possible. Water flows, roads are repaired, parks and playgrounds open and come to life. And behind each one of those services is a story of people who show up, care deeply, and lead with purpose, even when no one is watching. This is the HaltingWinter Podcast, and it's part of the HaltingWinter Project, a movement to restore pride, purpose, and participation in local government by sharing the stories that build belonging. I'm Seth Winterhalter, and every week I tell the stories that remind America where government really lives, locally, in our cities, our counties, and our communities. Before we hear today's conversation, I want to thank our founding sponsor, Tyler Technologies, a company that's been exclusively serving the public sector since 1998. From smarter budgeting to stronger resilience, Tyler Tech equips local governments with software and solutions that help leaders serve with clarity, efficiency, and impact. You can explore practical resources and hear the real success stories from communities across the country at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. Tyler Technologies, empowering the public sector to build stronger, more connected communities. Now, let's turn to today's conversation. My guest on the podcast today is Becky Windt Pearson, City Manager of Anchorage, Alaska. Well, just saying Alaska makes me a little cold in the bones, especially being there recently and it was 0 degrees. Becky, welcome to the podcast. It is a pleasure to have you on today.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're going to have a great time unpacking your story. It was so fun to be in Alaska just last month, the end of 2025, for the 75th anniversary of the Alaska Municipal League, their annual conference. Niels Anderson, I love him, just doing some great work there as the executive director of that, and Sarah King. And it was just so unique to interact with people and hear kind of even just how they got to the conference. And it just reminded me, Alaska is like a world to itself. It is the frontier. It is crazy, wild living. And so I can't wait to hear what it's like being the municipal manager of Anchorage, the largest city, I believe, in Alaska, but also in such a unique place. And you have an incredible story. I can't wait to dive in, but we got to do what we do here on the HaltingWinter Podcast. Take us back to the beginning, Becky, and help us get to know you as a person. Tell us about where you were born and the childhood that kind of shaped you and led you on this unique journey.
Sure. Okay. So I am from rural upstate New York. I was born in, actually, I wasn't born in the town that I grew up in, because the town that I grew up in did not have a hospital, which is actually a story that resonates a lot in Alaska, not a lot in New York, but a lot here, where very commonly people are born in places where they don't live, because medical care in rural Alaska is generally provided in hub communities or provided centrally in Anchorage. And so it's actually, I think that is kind of foreshadowing of the life to come, right? Where, I grew up in a rural community in a cold place in upstate New York near the mountains. And I grew up with a very involved set of parents. My parents were teachers. My dad taught at a community college. And he taught very intentionally there because he felt like it gave him the opportunity that he had when he had gotten out of the Army to have a first toehold in education and really make a fundamental change in, with the course of his life by having access to that kind of degree. And my mom was a special education teacher, and my dad was on the local planning commission, and he was on the local school board, and my parents were Boy Scout leaders and Girl Scout leaders, and just really heavily involved in our local community. And so in some ways, the fact that I would end up as a municipal leader in a cold place elsewhere, a remote place elsewhere in the world, was in some ways very much connected to where and how I grew up in this small town in upstate New York. I'll say when I showed up in Alaska, almost out here for the first time 28 years later, when it was the first time I came to Alaska, the thing that struck me here was it felt like it was like upstate New York, but with bigger mountains and better jobs. And so there was a real resonance with where I'd grown up that kind of led to me landing here in Anchorage, where I've stayed.
Fascinating. What was the size of the community you grew up in?
About 5,000 people. It was a college town, so it fluctuated summer to winter depending on the students, but no, not very big at all.
Yeah. So obviously when you say your parents not only were educators, which is one of the, I think one of the most powerful missional ways to give back and influence, right? So many people in their journeys, but involved in the local politics. So you said planning commissions, and so you kind of had, what was it like growing up? What was kind of your view of local government? Obviously, was that awareness, or because of your dad's involvement, did that make you aware of local government? Was there a city manager, administrator? What did that kind of look like for you as you grew up?
I would say I was aware without knowing I was aware to a certain degree. Like my father was always involved in the school board, again, the planning and zoning commission. I didn't think a ton about local government as a kid. I really started to do that after college. But I kind of had, it was tangible and close as I grew up and felt like a way that you obviously could pursue to be involved and engaged in your community.
Well, you're obviously seeing lives of service, represented in your parents. What was Becky doing with her time when you grew up? What were you kind of interested in? And what did you kind of think as you were kind of, those junior high, high school years? Did you kind of have a variety of different career ideas you were going to take on? What was that like?
Oh gosh, yeah, I had a whole variety. Sometimes I think about it and I was like, there was a period when I thought I was going to be a hairdresser when I was really small. Clearly did not pan out. And, I think by junior high school, I was getting closer. I remember in junior high school, I did a career exploration study. And actually, I think about this, I'm just making this connection now. I did interview a friend's mom who worked in solid waste management for our county and went and talked to her about her county government job because I was interested in working in the environmental field. All through junior high school and high school, I thought, oh, I'm going to do something. I'll be an environmental planner or I'll do some kind of environmental work, whatever form and shape that takes. I was honestly mostly familiar with teachers. My parents were teachers. I grew up in a tiny town where there was not a wide variety of different types of organizations. So I didn't completely know what shape my ambitions might take, like what I wanted to do with them. But I had this concept in junior high school and high school that I wanted to do something in the environmental field. Again, since the hairdressing wasn't going to work out.
It's so funny. We're on video right now, and you're looking at probably the baldest man in America. And I too had this crazy mop of red hair when I was a kid, and my mom thought I was going to be a hairdresser. I always had to have a different hair, style every day of the week. I was just so crazy. And your story reminds me a bit of John Morrow. I don't know if you know John.
Mm.
He's the city manager in Port Townsend, Washington. He grew up on the East Coast, and I believe actually his parents were teachers as well. I might be getting that wrong, but very into environmental, out and hiking and kind of environment, and his stories all over different New Zealand, all over the world. But back to Washington, where I'm at now. But it's interesting, right? Those interests and those kind of the curiosity, and like you say, all of a sudden, like you're just solid waste, and these little seeds planted and nuggets when you look back. So you end up at Harvard University. How did you? I mean, we all know Harvard's one of the greatest schools of America. These long history. What was the draw there? And sociology, I think, is your degree. Tell us about why that, and what was that like?
Yeah, those are great questions. And sometimes I feel like I wish I had a more intentional and trajectory story to tell about my education because a lot of it was sort of chance and circumstance. I had a really fantastic math teacher in high school. I went to a small public school. My public school was technically 3 buildings, but they were all connected. So I started at the left-hand side when I was 5, and I graduated from the right-hand side. I left when I was 17. I went and studied abroad on a scholarship in Germany, but I technically graduated at 18 from the far right-hand side of the building. And I had a really great math teacher, just serendipitously in this tiny public school. I had this fantastic math teacher. He taught me calculus. And he also just was constantly kind of dropping things and ideas to me of what he thought I should do. And he's the one who suggested that I apply for this scholarship to study abroad. And he also said, oh, you should apply for Harvard. His son had gone to Harvard. And I was like, I don't know him any to Harvard. What are you talking about? This is insane. But he's like, oh, no, you should apply. And even my guidance counselor was like, oh, that sounds crazy. and so I was studying abroad my senior year because I had applied for this scholarship that my high school math teacher told me to apply for. And I got that scholarship. And I had never been outside of the country. I'd never been on a plane. and I got on a plane and went to Germany, where I didn't speak any word of the language, but I had gotten this full government scholarship to go to Germany. And so they sent me over there. And I remember I like hand wrote my application because I had a German computer and it kept auto correcting all of my attempts to write my application into German. And I was sort of alone in Germany, flying solo, trying to do this. But I was like, I don't know. Maybe Mr. Lena says he thinks that I could get in. And I mean, it would be amazing if I could get in. So we'll see what happens. And I applied um, early to Harvard and was wildly lucky. And I got in. I remember I was homesick in Germany, and the like courier came to the door with my acceptance letter, and I was just blown away, And I had only sort of visited before I went. I'd sort of driven by the campus with my parents during a very hurried college visit before I left on student exchange. And I remember I had really felt committed to going. It was an extraordinary school, but I also felt like it was going to give me a very different college experience from where I'd grown up. I applied to a number of other colleges that were also in small towns where I felt like I would continue to be the same person I was for the rest of my life. But I felt like if I went to this big, Harvard is very diverse. It's in the middle, smack in the middle of the big city. And so it was really appealing to me to try to go somewhere new that I felt like would really stretch me. And it did. I had a wonderful time at Harvard. I felt like the student body was extraordinary. Everyone was trying to do something exceptionally well. People were really thoughtful in a way that I had never kind of been around that concentration of tremendously thoughtful people. I think some of the things that are hard about an Ivy League school sort of went over my head because I wasn't even, one of my classmates wrote this book about how it was like this horrible exclusionary social scene. And I was like, oh my God, I missed that any of that was happening. Like, I just didn't even realize that. and I think, because, I was like a scholarship kid from a rural place. I think I just missed some of that. And so I had a fantastic time there. I started out studying environmental science and public policy because, that was my story. I wanted to work in the environmental field. And that's what I had chose as my major my freshman year. And then I started to get really involved in more human focused service work in Boston. I worked at and then eventually ran a summer program based in a public housing project in Boston. And I worked on a variety of education programs. I was on the board of a student run homeless shelter and just got really engaged in more direct service projects that were much more focused on more of the human side of the equation, and then shifted my focus to sociology as opposed to the more science focus and the environmental science major.
I love this. Okay, I want to back up just a minute because one of the things I love about this podcast and its aim is to encourage young people to strongly consider local government. But even bigger than that, I just want to encourage young people. And that's why I love walking through the stories of people to say there's no one path. In fact, I think that's the beauty of hearing leaders like yourself unpack their stories is to go, there's more about these fundamental root kind of values and actions people take. It's less about where you go and more about your mindset and kind of like one of the things I want to highlight for you is that awareness of going, I don't want to just be the same person from this little same place. I want to stretch myself. That's such a huge risk and such a huge, I think, mindset that opens up doors of opportunity. So I want to go back to what was it like to be in a small place? Again, I grew up in this very rural, I think that, well, it's farm town. The town still is, I think, under 100 people. But to go to Germany, of all places, to risk going, abroad, and then again, to come back and, when you're homesick, to not just settle for a small place, but to go to a place in, Boston, of all places. I mean, I love Boston. So tell us about what was the scary and what was the cool about going to studying abroad and then even Boston, that change?
It's a really good question. I mean, honestly, I think going to Germany was in many ways like a life-defining choice that I made more lightly than I probably should have. I said, okay, this sounds cool. I'll do that. I've never been anywhere. I would like to go somewhere. And I think about it now and I think, wow, I mean, when I went, technology wasn't what it was now. And so I called home maybe once a month, if that was what I was allowed to do. And email didn't really exist. I think I had an email address I could access sporadically at school, but mostly my friends mailed me letters. And so it's a very different kind of communication landscape than now when you can FaceTime your or Skype your family all the time from abroad. And it was life defining. I had never lived anywhere different than where I had grown up. I remember even just noticing that like Germans use their forks differently than Americans, and just having this realization that like everything that you thought was immutable is in fact movable. And people do things huge variety of different ways. And all of that is great. Like every single thing you took for granted, like how you do your laundry and how you get to school and how you approach learning is all movable. And I think for me, that was really profound and helpful at a young age because I was 17, and I think I really encourage student exchange young. I think at a young age, it's really helpful because I was so reliant on the family that I lived with, so I had to be deeply enmeshed in how they lived and how they did things. Um, but it was not easy.
Mm.
I remember gave me an appetite for realizing that like how you kind of do hard things and ease into hard things and get strength from doing them. But it was definitely challenging as a 17-year-old to be so far from home and to not have those the basic supports of family and familiarity and language. But it also was really empowering and strength building to think, by the end of the year, I did all of my school in German. And I remember at the end of the year, I was tremendously proud because I got like a B on a test, like legitimately by writing it in German graded on the same scale with all the other German kids. And I was used to doing really well in school, but it was such an achievement to just be like, to be able to achieve that level of German fluency and competence in the classroom and to be able to be treated on par with other German kids and be graded on par with them and not be the special case who was trying to catch up. And I made some really good friends. And again, I think would learn some really foundational lessons about like just understanding that people do things again a wide variety of different ways, and that all of that is fine, and that you shouldn't like that there are just so many different ways to approach living in this world that we have to appreciate and not assume one way is right.
I love that. It's so good. And I love that you kind of didn't get in your head about it. You're just like, oh, it sounds fun. Let's just do it. And then it's just like, I think more people should just, you kind of say yes. As opportunity comes, just say yes. Oh, so cool. So I think one of the other things that you mentioned there, I think is worth just unpacking. When you get to Harvard, you said you're engaged in that boys' home. You're doing extracurricular things that are then allowing you to kind of shift and change and see what you want to do with your life. And I think that's one of the draws of why I'm so passionate about local government is there's just no greater work to get your hands impacting people's lives on a day-to-day basis with vital things, the things that are the essential services of life. And so how cool is it how instrumental was the extracurricular in really shaping the direction that you wanted to take? Because I think sometimes we can make excuses, right? You're paying a lot of money for school, especially for college, and you got to do the classes, you got to focus on the grades, and maybe you say no to some of those extracurricular things. I don't have the time, but you made the time. And how, I think, just to encourage young people, how instrumental was that in planting the seeds and shaping your future?
Oh, I think it was absolutely the like building blocks of my life for the extracurricular. I mean, I learned a huge amount at Harvard too, in the classroom, but the opportunity to be in those again, I think what I liked about Harvard students, which is not unique to Harvard students. I'm sure this happens in all kinds of different places, but it was my experience of being in a place with a bunch of very extraordinary, motivated people. Was this concept that anything was possible, right? Like where I had come from, if someone said, oh, we need a shelter, we need more shelter beds in Harvard Square. I was used to like the Harvard students were like, oh, well, we'll just do that. Like, has someone gone down to the church and seen if we could start a shelter there? And that was a mindset that was different from that kind of mindset where I'd grown up and what I was used to. And so again, I'm sure it exists in all kinds of other situations, but it was for me kind of the first experience of being totally immersed in that, like, well, I'm sure I can be a solution. And I'm sure that like, if we just ask the right people and like go out and we could raise the money, like, has anyone asked for the money? That kind of mindset. And so I think that being part of that extracurricular experience taught me a lot about being engaged in the local community. It taught me a lot about running an organization. It taught me a lot about thinking about solutions and assuming that you can be part of a solution and not assuming, oh, someone else will do it, or like, I can't do that. Like, there must be someone else who's more qualified. And there's certainly, I'm sure, there's some entitlement and arrogance that goes into that too. That's part of that equation for sure. But there's also some magic and some ownership, and that was good to be around and help me to think about the rest of my career in terms of what I could do to be useful in a local community. And it taught me about listening to a local community, also like not assuming that I might know the answer before I spent time with people who had done work in community spaces for decades and decades and decades. And I think that the extracurricular experiences I had at Harvard were absolutely as important, if not more important, than the experiences I had in the classroom in terms of shaping the knowledge I needed to live and build a career after college.
So good. And if someone, I'll be interested to hear. I always love hearing from people when they listen to people's podcasts. They're like, I had no idea that's part of Becky's story. And so, if you just look at your resume from Harvard, there's kind of this gap until Yale, and people, if they know your career, know that you've been a highly successful attorney. What happens in this gap between Harvard and Yale? What's the journey that leads you to really the attorney life?
Well, it was a wild journey. I left Harvard thinking that I wanted to teach. Honestly, I had spent a lot of time working in community spaces, and I admired the work my parents had done. And I thought, I think I want to work in public education, maybe in teaching and then in administration, but I think public education is where I want to go. And so I left Harvard with a summer job, which was a lark. I had a job writing for a travel guide publication, which is based at Harvard, the Let's Go travel guide series. And I wrote a portion of the Germany guide, which meant I got to go to all these national parks in the southern part of the country. And that was great fun. And I came back and I had a job teaching at a private school, for a tuition-free private school for low-income girls, run by the School Sisters of Notre Dame, which is an order of nuns whose calling is to start schools for women who would otherwise, or women and girls who would otherwise not have access to high-quality education. They do this all over the world. And they have a school in Dorchester, Massachusetts, that I had visited and just really loved. I'm not Catholic. I my school had a real magic to it. They were doing extraordinary work there. It was really dedicated, fantastic teachers. And so I got a job there and came back and thought, well, I'll do that for 2 years. And then I'll probably figure out a path back to graduate school and go on to career in education. And again, I feel like this is the meandering part where I was teaching. I loved the teaching. And then, honestly, I remember when the Iraq War started and just feeling like there was just some really stark moments of inequality. I think half of the kids I was teaching sent a direct relative into combat in the first week of that engagement, in a very stark contrast to the people I'd gone to college with. I felt very removed from the conflict. And I had all these kids I was teaching with who it took me 6 months to realize couldn't see the board because they didn't have health insurance to pay for glasses. And I just kept bashing my head against these kind of larger structural issues. And so we're coming up on a presidential election, and Howard Dean spoke at the Democratic National Convention about healthcare and the Middle East. And I was like, well, I like that guy. I'll go work for him for the summer. And his campaign's not going to go anywhere because his ideas are too far out there. And so I'll work for him for the summer. And then, he hopefully will make enough of a mark that his ideas will get folded into whoever's campaign really takes off. I'll go back and teach, and this will be my summer job. But it'll give me a chance to really engage with these larger issues. So I went and I worked. I got a job in the early days of the Howard Dean campaign in New Hampshire. This is the primary campaign. Ran a field office for the western half of the state, and then we were more successful than anticipated. And by the end of the summer, by August, he was ahead by like 20 points in the polls. And it was this wild moment. And we thought, oh, wow, we're actually going to be successful. And we hired a whole bunch more people who knew more about politicking than I did. But I stayed and kept working there on the campaign. And then the campaign was not successful in the end. Everyone knows the story. I watched Howard Dean scream in Iowa and then was told, well, we're not going to be paying you anymore. But we got incredible experience, learned a lot about, I feel like a New Hampshire primary season is an amazing thing to live through. And so by that point, I had left my teaching job because I had stayed in New Hampshire on the hope that this was going to be it. We were going to be successful in this election. So I was in New Hampshire and I stayed and I had a couple jobs in New Hampshire. And this was, again, kind of chance and circumstance. I had a boyfriend in New Hampshire and I had just, I had an apartment and then I'd gotten laid off by the campaign. So I was there and I really liked where I lived in New Hampshire. I'd gotten really involved in the local community as part of being the regional field organizer for the part of New Hampshire where I was living. And I think this is really where I start to dig into local government as where I think I want to go, because I got a series of jobs and I worked at a nonprofit group home facility for abused and neglected kids. And then I worked at Dartmouth College. I worked there at their student community service organization. But while I was doing all that, I joined our local pedestrian and bike path advisory commission. And then I joined our local planning and zoning commission. And then my friend wanted to run for city council. And she said, how do I do this? You know about campaigning. What do I do? And so I built her little campaign plan and we went out and knocked doors and we counted votes and got her elected to city council. And then she got elected mayor had a weak mayor form of government. So she got elected mayor from within the city council. And then she was like, well, that was really successful. So let's go see if we can help other people run for local government. So we had this little training and we went around New Hampshire and helped train people to run for city council in their respective communities. And that was when I really dug into local government, and in part because I was like, I need a break from this federal scene. And I really want to be somewhere, start to dig in somewhere where I think I can make a difference really tangibly, locally, in a place that I've gotten to be really invested in. And that's when I started thinking about going back to law school. I figured I was at the point where I was like, I need to go back to graduate school. What do I want to do? And it was this local land use and local government work that I was doing that I thought I'd like to do more of this. And I think a legal lens is the next phase of education that I need as part of this kind of work trajectory and journey.
We're living through one of the biggest shifts local government has ever seen. Not political, not cultural, it's digital. AI, automation, cybersecurity, cloud migration, none of this used to be part of your job description. But now it's the choppy water every city and county is swimming in. And for many leaders, it feels less like innovation and more like what's going to break next, and will we survive it? Here's the truth most people won't say out loud. A lot of governments aren't afraid of the cloud. They're afraid of getting it wrong. Because the stakes are real. You're trying to protect data, modernize ancient systems, improve service, and keep your residents happy, all while staying under budget and out of the fire. That's why I appreciate the team at Tyler Technologies. They don't talk about the cloud like it's magic pixie dust. They break it down. What to migrate, when to migrate, how to get long-term value without blowing your budget or burning out your people. They've helped more local governments make this transition than anyone I know, and they've put all their best insights into a new ebook about cloud adoption and strategy. If you're trying to lead your organization into the future instead of getting dragged there, you got to check this out. Their newest guide is called Modern Governments Live in the Cloud, and you can download it for free at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter, WINTER. TylerTech.com/winter. Go check it out. Download the free guide. Now, back to the conversation. So fascinating. And Yale, so you end up at Yale, again, Harvard and Yale. I'm sure you'll underplay it, but that it takes some brains to get into both these schools. You can't just do one, maybe you fluke one, but you can't fluke two, I don't think. So obviously Yale must have been an amazing experience. I almost went to Yale for a seminary degree. I loved their seminary program. They're just incredible thinkers. So what was Yale like? And then from Yale, how in the world do you end up in Alaska, the other side of the states?
Yeah. So I ended up at Yale again, sort of similar. I was like, well, I'm not going to apply to Yale. Like, I'm never going to get into Yale. And then my college roommate and I were in Vietnam on a trip, and I remember we were sitting in the street, and it was like Vietnamese Independence Day or something, or some national Vietnamese holiday. There was like lots of festivities happening in the street, and she was like, "You gotta apply. I'm gonna pay," because I was like, "Ah, it's gonna cost me like another $100 to apply, and it's gonna be for nothing. Like, no one gets into Yale." And she says, she's like, "Oh, I'll pay for it. Like, if you apply, I'll pay for the application fee." And so she did, and I applied and did. Again, I mean, I think getting into Yale is an act of luck for even the strongest student, because it's such a tiny class. But I was enormously fortunate to get in there, and it was also great because I was a little bit of an older student, and I wanted, I'd been off for 4 years, so not a wildly older student, but I think, but a very significant portion of Yale goes pretty much straight through, or takes 1 year off and comes back in. And so 4 years felt like a decent amount of life experience comparatively. And enough that I wanted to build a very specific kind of legal education and didn't necessarily want to be on law review and moot court. And I was able to do that at Yale. I took classes at the forestry school. The forestry school at Yale has some really fantastic land use planning classes. They had a woman teaching land use planning who was really actively involved in cases in front of various different planning and zoning commissions around the New Haven area. I took classes at the business school. I had some really fantastic transportation planning classes there, which continue to kind of haunt my life, because now I oversee the port of Alaska. And so think back to when I was learning about intermodal transport at Yale School of Management. And then I also was able to, I did, an internship in New York City and got some credit for that as part of the work that I did. I was piecing together kind of my education at Yale. So I liked that a lot about being at Yale. New Haven also has a really fascinating local history. I don't know how much you know about New Haven, but it has, it's kind of been a little bit of a laboratory for a lot of urban experiments. And so it has a really fascinating land use history of its own. That was neat to be part of as well. So I had a great experience there. And then ended up in Alaska, same college roommate. She and I were supposed to go on another trip the summer before my last year of law school. And then she couldn't come at the last minute. Her father got remarried and she had to go to the wedding. And so she canceled on me. And I was like, oh, when am I going to go last minute? So I signed up for a Habitat for Humanity trip to come to Alaska. And I came up here and I built houses in a neighborhood in Anchorage called Mountain View. And I really just loved Alaska from the first time I got here. It felt a lot like, again, from where we started, it felt like upstate New York, but with bigger mountains and better jobs. It felt like a very tight-knit, cold weather community that I really resonated with. And I went back to Yale, and the justices of the Alaska Supreme Court do a recruiting tour around the country because there's no law school in Alaska. And so the then Chief Justice of the court is this fantastic woman named Dana Fabe, came to Yale, and I interviewed with her, and I was like, I'm sold. Like, you're amazing. Alaska's amazing. And they hire for the whole court. So she hired me to clerk for another amazing woman named Morgan Kristen. And so I just, it was, again, a serendipity of a variety of different things where it just felt like the right choice. And I had a job offer in New York that I could defer for a year. So very safe. I came up here for a year to see if I liked it. And I would say within a few months knew that this is where I wanted to stay for the foreseeable future.
So tell us about, so you do the clerk, I think you clerk for a year or two, and then and then you head into kind of, I assume it's kind of the private sector, Ashburn and Mason, GCI. Tell us about those years in law and in Alaska and Anchorage. What was it like being in, again, that unique state and unique environment, and then practicing law?
Sure. Yeah. And I would say, um, as a preface to that, if you think about what is the thread that ties together all the things that I've done in my post law school career? And I think it's that my real interest lies in the space where government and the private sector intersect and can most productively work together. And, when I was in law school, I worked at the New York City Economic Development Corporation, and the public benefit corporation model in New York is very much something that brings that together consciously. And we don't really have that here. We have one community development authority that's part of the municipal government. But otherwise, that work for me has lived in a variety of different spaces. So that's really what I've done in a variety of different spaces, right? So I went from clerking, you're right, to private practice at a fantastic small firm called Ashburn and Mason. And I practiced, I did a variety, like any Alaska lawyer, good Alaska lawyer, I did like a wide variety of things. I worked on oil and gas, or mostly natural gas matters. I worked on real estate issues. I worked on land use issues. But again, a lot of it was at that intersection. It was like publicly regulated utilities. It was, applying for helping private developers navigate the permitting process, the public permitting process, in order to achieve like a strong development application that was then permittable. And so I did that for, about 5 years. I became a shareholder in the firm. And then honestly, I had kids, and I felt like I wanted to transition to something that the billable hour is a hard mistress when you have children, and you want to try and be as efficient as possible and have some time outside of the office. And so I, even in a wonderful and forgiving setting like an Alaska law firm. And so I went over to work for a friend who worked at GCI, which is Alaska's largest telecommunications provider. This is the place where I ended up taking, people all over the state to help them understand the challenges of providing telecommunications in a rural setting. And there I worked on land use and environmental issues for the telecommunications company, for large scale telecommunications development. So we would work on permitting and trying to acquire land rights to build, to lay fiber across tundra and to build towers and communities all over the state. And I did more standard real estate deals too. I bought and sold, tower leases, and I dealt with store leases and et cetera. And it was a great company to work for. And I had a really good work-life balance, and I had a fantastic team. I got to stand up the first environmental team for the company. And then I had the opportunity to come. I'd always kind of wanted to be the municipal attorney for the municipality of Anchorage, and because I'd worked for the city of New York for the Corp Council division in college, and I really admired the municipal attorney in Anchorage, and I was sort of waiting for an aligned mayor. And then we had a mayor who I really liked, and he hired someone who I really admired, who was not me, to be his municipal attorney. And then that person was promoted to be municipal manager. And he called me and asked me if I wanted to come be the municipal attorney. And so that's how I ended up moving out of those years of private practice and my first stint in industry into, my first stint in municipal government in Alaska, being municipal attorney.
Wow. Well, again, you're so experienced now by the time you become the municipal attorney, but it's always interesting when you go fully into the public sector like that. What was it like to then work for the municipality of Anchorage? And give us a view, because I think you're the first municipal attorney I've had on the podcast. Tell us about that unique role. What does it do? What is it, especially because of municipal, that's why I love local government. You guys are into everything. Like you even mentioned, you got land use, you got housing, you got all kinds of things. What was that like? It sounds like work-life balance might have been the challenge.
Well, so the municipal attorney in Anchorage is a variety of things, which create all kinds of hilarious ethical conundrums. I used to call our ethics counsel for the bar all the time, and he'd be like, "What is happening?" Because the municipal attorney in Anchorage oversees a civil division, which provides legal counsel to all of the municipalities, core functions, everything, contract support services, just, basic legal advice to everything that the municipality does. The municipal attorney also supervises the criminal division in the municipality of Anchorage. The state has delegated misdemeanor prosecution to the municipality. And so Anchorage prosecutes all misdemeanors with its own prosecution team. And then also oversees the Office of Administrative Hearings. There's an administrative hearing officer at Anchorage that, again, this begins the conundrums, the ethical conundrums. The municipal attorneys frequently appear in front of the administrative hearing officer, who hears like appeals from municipal, municipal fines and et cetera, can be appealed. If you have an animal control violation or something, can be appealed to our administrative hearing officer. The municipal attorney in Anchorage per charter is counsel to both the mayor and to the legislative branch. And that has taken different forms in different administrations, depending on how aligned the mayor and the legislative branch are. When I was municipal attorney, our two branches of government were fairly well aligned. So I spent a fairly significant amount of time advising our legislative branch and then also advising our executive branch. And so it was all manner of things. I would say a lot of my time when I was municipal attorney was eaten up by, we had a very substantial transaction. We sold one of our municipal utilities for $1 billion when I was municipal attorney, which was big doings for the municipality of Anchorage. So that took up a significant amount of my time. We did some really intense work on mitigating nuisance properties when I was municipal attorney. That took up a lot of my time. And so, but it was all manner of different things. I had the very lucky, I was in the very lucky position of being in the role of municipal attorney when I had a very stable office that had been, I had a lot of attorneys who'd been there for quite a few years. We had a very strong office, a lot of diverse specialties, people with a long history in municipal law. So to the extent it was new or shocking to me to be on the other side of the fence legally, I had a lot of people who were very strong experts to support me. It was funny going from being, I remember at one point, one of my former clients showed up and said something to our building official, and he said, "She's on our team now."
I love it.
So it was like a changing of sides a bit for me when I moved over to the municipal government.
I love it. When you were you served in that role for I think 3-4 years. When you're in that role, did you ever think about municipal manager? Especially because it seems like your predecessor was in your role and then went to that. So it obviously, it's always I guess an opportunity when you see someone to move into that role from the same. But did you have any that, because next on your timeline you go back to GCI for a handful of years before you become the municipal manager. So what was going through your mind when you were serving that? Did you have any aspirations to become the municipal manager? Was that even on the radar?
I did think about it, actually. You said, my predecessor, Bill Falsey at the municipality, was the municipal attorney before he went to be municipal manager. It's fantastic. And he ran for mayor, and he eventually left the municipal manager role to run for mayor. And when he knew he was thinking about that for quite some time before he actually took the step to do that. And so he had actually talked to me about it. He said, would you be interested potentially in taking the role? And so I had thought very actively about it and was very interested in it, and actually wrestled quite a bit with the question of it would have been just at the very tail end, because it would have been when he eventually stepped aside to run for mayor, and no longer than that. But I very much so was interested in the idea. I think over time I've come to realize that I'm a better manager than I am a lawyer. And I'm a fine lawyer, but I'm a better manager than I am a lawyer. And so I think that really where my kind of calling lies is in roles where I have that management role. And I had that at GCI too. So when I had that opportunity to go back to GCI in the end, I chose to take that path. But it was definitely something that I thought about. And so when I had the opportunity again, when Mayor Suzanne LaFrance was elected, it was absolutely something I couldn't turn down.
Talk about that, because again, you take the role, you've been the municipal manager since July of 2024. And so what do you think makes you a better manager than what you had been? What are the what are the unique, not just skills, but also what does that look like? What do you think a municipal manager, if you were saying this is what, that job is, this is what to focus on to be productive? Because it is an incredibly unique role, and one that like takes, it seems from me looking from the outside in, you got to have a lot of skills of leadership to touch a lot of things, but not get in the weeds a lot of things, because nothing will get done if you're the bottleneck to it all. So what did that look like? What insights do you have there?
Oh man, into the role of municipal manager. I mean, I think you're exactly right. Like I think about, I've had a couple senior executive jobs at this point, and when people are new to senior executive management and are like, "Oh God, how do I do this?" I'm always like, I feel like you have your job is, a couple different pieces. Your job, first of all, is to kind of hire and empower the right people, and then get out of their way, give them the tools to be successful, right? And a lot of those tools involve transparency and information and skills, right? That you want to make sure. I think a lot of like, sometimes people go awry in management when they're not pushing down enough information. So people don't know, like they need to know what the mayor's priorities are in order to make them happen, right? Basic stuff like that, right? We got to be clear about what we want people to do. We got to be clear about how we want them to do it. We got to be clear about what the goals are and what the timing is that we want them to get done. And then we got to give them the tools, the money, the training, the people that they need in order to get their work done, and trust that they can do it, and give them this, empower them to get it done. I do think you're right that it involves a lot of keeping a lot of balls moving at once, tracking a lot of different things, but not getting too far in the weeds. I think the manager's job does involve getting far in the weeds on certain sticky things, right? You got to know which things are either like political enough that you got to rescue a director from having to be part of it and got to stand with the mayor to fix it, or hard enough that they need an additional layer of hands in order to do that and really be successful and make sure it gets over the line, critical enough where you really have to own it so you can make sure that every piece of it is done. But that those things are very few and far between, where you don't want to get in the way of your director's ability to really actualize on their ability to get their work done, in most instances. And then, I think you have to solve a lot of, you get a lot of people's feelings, I think, in this role too. I feel like one of my truisms in this role is like, generally both sides are true, right? Like every problem that comes to me, I'm like, generally both sides of both arguments are correct in everything that comes to you. It's really important as a municipal leader, I think, to not hear the first member of the public who's upset and be like, "Oh my God, that's right, we got to go correct that." But to listen to both sides and acknowledge that, again, in almost every scenario, both things are true at once. And we have to sit with that and be able to find a policy solution that acknowledges the fact that there's always going to be multiple sides to each story. I also always tell my people, like, let's start with what's right and work back from there. Like, well, like think about what's the right solution, what's the like just and fair solution, what's good for the community, and then let's kind of work back from that to try and build toward that, to try and make that happen. But I don't know if that answers your question. I feel like
No, you did.
things I think about when I think about being municipal manager.
It's so good. Amazing insight. Tell us about, I want to, because Alaska is so unique, and Anchorage specifically, because again, here's my assumptions, you correct me, but tell us a little bit about Anchorage, because it is the hub city. My assumption is most everything happens in Anchorage. I mean, that's where the conference was. So there's a lot of people all over the state that are flying into there for conferences and meetings. Like you even mentioned, like a lot of people are born in Anchorage, which sounds crazy to have to, like, I can imagine if you're pregnant, what do you do? Just go move to Anchorage for the last month of your pregnancy? And then,
You do. We have a whole subset of hotels that are actually like short-term residences. Like my sister-in-law lives in a rural community in Southeast Alaska, and she moved to Alaska for the last, I think, 6 weeks of her pregnancy. And you stay for a certain amount of time afterwards and then fly back. So yeah, we have a whole set of systems around our hospitals that are designed for people who are coming both for maternity stays and then also for other medical care where they have to stay for a longer period of time for, advanced visits and then aftercare, et cetera.
Again, you got, it's just kind of normal life in Alaska, and yet it is the most radical foreign thing to think about here in the lower land. Tell us about Anchorage. What's the size and what is unique about not only leading a city like Anchorage with all these unique components, but even in a place like Alaska? Help us help us who haven't maybe been there to get a feel for your unique role and that unique place.
That's okay. So I would say first, so Anchorage is about 300,000 people. But Anchorage, when I say Anchorage, Anchorage is a unified municipality. So it's not, it's both a city and a county, essentially. They're unified into a single, well, we have boroughs, we don't have counties in Alaska. And so Anchorage itself is enormous. It stretches north to Chief River, which is probably quite a bit farther north than you made it when you were here, and then south all the way past Girdwood, where our ski resort is located, and then down to Portage, the Portage Valley. And so I would say a couple unique things about Anchorage and governing in Anchorage. One is it is really remote, right? Everything that we need has to come in from somewhere else. We have the Port of Alaska is municipal infrastructure. Basically, everything that comes into, at least half of everything that comes into Alaska comes across the dock at the port, comes across the dock on Sundays and Tuesdays. If you go to the grocery store on Sunday morning, it will be terrible because the produce that's sitting there came in on Tuesday. Like every week, doesn't come in on different days. That's the store reality of everything. When we are trying to get things here, there is often very real delay time or availability time when we order new equipment. It comes from very far away and takes a long time to get here. And so while we are a very substantial city, we are extremely far away from the rest of the world, and essentially from a supply chain perspective, function like an island, because the vast majority of what comes to us on via ships, over the sea as opposed to over land. Two, we are a very, very cold city that gets a lot of snow. And so, like recently I was in Boise, Idaho, which is a great city, has, a lot of things that I would love to see done in Anchorage, but they don't get the kind of snow we do. I was looking at their sidewalkscape and I was like, oh my God, we could never do that because you'd never be able to get snow off that sidewalk. Like there's like planters and beveled bike paths and like, oh God, so everything that we do has to be done with a mindset toward how do we live in this through a very severe winter, and a winter where the snow really doesn't melt. Most places the snow melts and or everything stops when it snows, right? And everyone just waits until it goes away. And then it's like, okay, we can come back out. And we don't do that. We function through snow. We function through ice. Our airport continues to operate pretty much all the time. We as a municipality also have a small airport as part of our portfolio, and people take off and land through all kinds of weather. And so we have to, again, every service that we offer has to be offered with a mindset toward the fact that we are a winter city. And a substantial portion of our budget is dedicated to snow removal, which is something that, we're basically police, fire, and snow removal. If you look at the three big buckets that we spend money on, which is very different than I think a city that has a much less substantial snow removal requirement. And then the third thing is the thing that you mentioned. We are a hub city. So we provide services to the state on a level that no other community in Alaska does. And so when we talk about issues like mental health and substance misuse treatment, and we talk about like our unsheltered population, and we talk about healthcare and et cetera, we are a place where a lot of people congregate looking for services. And we are the place that has to provide those services and figure out a way to do that. And so we have that kind of added question, added responsibility as a hub community that I think a lot of is relatively unique in the paradigm that we serve to Alaska, to the, again, unique in Alaska, and then also unique with, compared with other communities in the lower 48.
Like you say, the shipping reality, like one of the things as I engage with local government leaders around the nation is just infrastructure. And there's present day needs and there's the future, right? Replacing. So I can't imagine the wear and tear that snow removal and just snow and ice does on your roads, on your infrastructure. But like you say, you can be doing a project and then all of a sudden shipping impacts the ability to get needed, whether that's equipment or resources to be able to do some of that work. I would imagine there's another layer of challenge and frustration that you guys have to face that often others, on the lower land we just wouldn't be aware of. And so just unique challenges that you're rolling with.
Absolutely. We have a very, very short build season, and we have a very, very long and complicated supply chain. So definitely, like, people building projects in Alaska is a very unique challenge and a real needle to thread because, we have snow sometimes until the end of May and sometimes starting in the middle of September. Layer on top of that, we have, we're talking about, shipping delays and supply chain disruptions. And so it's a really intense challenge to build a complex project in Alaska.
It was interesting while I was up there when I flew out, actually, there were a bunch of people flying down to the Seahawk game. And it was like, it had this mindset of, there's no like, I don't think you have I mean, do you have I think maybe you have a minor league hockey team or something?
We do.
Like, it's kind of
Yes.
like, you have to think about, yeah, like to kind of engage in some of those things that we take for granted that we have. You have to, get on a, whatever that is, 4-hour flight, to come down. So it's just, a unique world that you live in, and unique challenges that I think are really, I'm sure that people, I would hope would pick your brain about how do you, what can we learn from you, because you're facing some really unique challenges that I'm sure your team has to be super creative. Like you say, when a building season is that short, how do you hit the ground running? And maybe that's what, one of my questions is always work-life balance. You mentioned it before, when you had your kids, that job kind of gave you an easier time with that. What is that like as the municipal manager in Anchorage for yourself, but also for a team when you have something like that? It's a great example. When you've got a lot of pressure, every municipality has budget season, and that's when we got to, long hours are coming up. When you have a building season that short, I'm sure that, it's all hands on deck. Do we have everything lined up? Talk about some of the unique challenges that you face in light of work-life balance, not only for yourself, but for your team.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, as a baseline, Alaska has a good outlook toward work-life balance. So the thing that's helpful is that this is a state, I've always joked with people, like, you don't choose to live here if you want to work all the time, right? There's like, it's just not a state that you choose to live in if your goal is to work all the time. So generally speaking, the outlook of Alaskans is we should find a way to interweave, our love for the outdoors and our time with our families into work that matters to us. So I think that helps make this less of an all-consuming job than it could otherwise be. But you're absolutely right that we have incredibly busy seasons. The teams that work for me each have their own highly demanding seasons. You think about the summer, one of the things that we do far more than many other communities is repainting the lines on our roads, because we script them off basically every winter because of the immense amount of snow removal and maintenance that we do in the winter. And so in the summer, our road painting crews work basically all night, every night, painting roads, repainting roads all over town. So we have teams like that work, around the clock in the summer. In Alaska, it's light almost, while the sun does go down in Anchorage, it never gets fully dark in Anchorage in the summer. And so people, we have the ability to work. We have 2 teams that will do work all around the clock in the summer because that's the season to get things done. Likewise, we have teams that work all around the clock in the winter. When we have snow, our snow operators work every single minute of the day. There's a municipal employee who's a fabulous, outstanding, dedicated human being named Paul Van Landingham, who is the only person who I feel comfortable calling at 4 a.m, because if I'm working, I know that Paul is working, because he is so dead. He's in charge of our street maintenance team. And if there's a snow event, I know that Paul is awake every minute that he can be in order to make sure that his team is clearing the roads, that he's keeping people, for us, when the roads are not clear, it's a life safety issue. It's a livelihood issue. People can't get to work. They can't get to school. People can't get to their medical appointments. And so his team is incredibly dedicated to making sure that happens. And they work just, again, around the clock. You're right. Budget season is busy for the team that manages our budget. When we have had an increasing number of severe weather events, our emergency management team works whenever we had a wind event last winter. We had an event this fall where we did not have our own emergency, but we were playing host to about 700 people who were displaced by Typhoon Halong in Western Alaska and came to be supported within the municipality of Anchorage. And so depending on the season and the demands, I have teams that work an incredible amount and with enormous dedication. For me, this job ebbs and flows. It's certainly a large job. It requires a lot of time. It again, I'm fortunate that I have colleagues and a city that values balance, and so I think I'm able to step out and exercise or spend evenings with my kids or bring my kids. My kids have come to City Hall and climbed the terminal at the port, and they've seen our plow equipment, and gotten to be part of the community here too. Um, and I do a lot of juggling, email after bedtime and everything that other working parents do. But the demands of running a city for anyone are significant.
I love what you said there. I think there is something unique, and I felt that they're interacting while they're speaking for the conference and just interacting with different people from around the state. You have a sense that it's not quite caught up, or it's not consumed with the hustle and bustle of the lower 48. I think there's something. I feel that even in Seattle, like, it's just gloomy right now. It's the winter. I feel like I'm a bear and I need to hibernate. Like, why are we working so hard during winter? And yeah, it's kind of what we do. So it's really cool to hear that and to see a place that still is mindful of its place, of its context, and to care for that. One of the things you said, speaking of the typhoon, I went over and had dinner at, I think it's called Glacier Brew House. They were having their barley wine event. It was kind of fun, cool place to hang out. And I met, there was the person next to me was from FEMA, and he was sent there to he's part of the team that goes around the nation and does the post kind of care and resetting. And it was fascinating to think. And again, I hadn't even known that, like, that wasn't even on my radar. And I think, and then someone else was mentioning earthquakes. And I was just like, that's the thing. Alaska kind of lives on its own. It's like its own continent up there. And so you guys you deal with a lot of things that I think are on the radar of most people. And there you are. And it takes leaders. And I think that's why I love highlighting these stories. This is where local government's so powerful. There's a purpose for state and federal, obviously, but local government is the government of the people. And I think the sad thing right now, and that's part of the purpose of this podcast, we only see the political realities of federal and state, and we forget that the local is there doing the essential things that make modern life possible. And like you say, making sure that snow is removed so people can get to work, can get to their hospital, can get to the everyday things that, like, again, we just kind of take for granted as modern day residents in America. So thanks for doing what you do. It's an amazing story. And I think, I know that the cruise up to Alaska is very popular. Everyone comes out of Seattle. I'm always, I want to be in Seattle. We got to hang out while I'm going on my cruise. But man, I don't know if there's a better city to fly into. Every time, it's like I forget every time. And I've only been there a handful of times, but every time I fly into Anchorage, just the ring of mountains is just glorious. And so, what would you encourage me the next time I come up to Anchorage? What do I need to do?
Oh man, are you an outdoor person at all?
Well, I will be. I'll force myself.
I have said frequently, I've been asked before, what are your favorite outdoor things? And I love the things that are really actually very close to town, but make you feel like you are in, just the most extraordinary setting. One of my very favorite things to do in Anchorage is to crust ski in the spring, which is when our mud flats, they're all along the ocean, freeze solid. And so you can go out on your skis and just ski for miles and miles and miles on this crust that's, adjacent to our sand dunes along the Pacific Ocean. And I love that. It feels like you're in some kind of surreal, like super remote universe, and you just pop down from a municipal park. I love ice skating on Portage Lake, which happens, that's more condition. Both these are condition dependent. You don't always get crust in the spring. It depends on the freeze thaw cycle and how much snow we've had. Similarly, I love Portage Lake is just again at the very southern tip of the municipality, and it is this fantastic glacial lake. And you don't always get the perfect freeze thaw cycle where it freezes and isn't covered in snow. But when you do, it is glassy and gorgeous. And it's a 3 mile or so skate out to the glacier and 3 miles or so back. And it's just stunning. And it's 45 minutes from downtown Anchorage. And so some of my favorite things are really those things that are essentially urban experiences, but just highlight how connected Anchorage as an urban community is to staggering, wilderness. So that's what I would encourage you to do. If you are interested in outdoor adventure, I would encourage you to seek out those things that are just around the margins of the city itself, and that will let you see just again the staggering beauty that we live in the midst of here. And I would say thank you for your focus on local government. I think we often talk here about how the local government is with the end of the road, right? When no one else is going to show up, we're going to show up. When people don't know who else to turn to, they call their local government because they know that we're going to try to find a solution because someone needs to be responsive to the community. Our work on Typhoon Halong was a lot of that. They said, we were like, well, no one else is doing this, so we're going to figure out a solution for dogs who are being evacuated. And so that, I think that is the magic of local government, is that we're close to the people. We can move more quickly than any other level of government. We're solutions oriented, and we will always show up. We will be there to try and find a way, even when it's hard.
What an incredible story you have, and what incredible work you and your team are up to. I'm talking with the team that's putting on the Economic Summit. I think it's in Anchorage in April, and so I might be up there. We'll see.
Awesome.
But man, I can't wait till the next time I'm up there. It's going to be a great time. I'm definitely gonna. I'll call you, and you have to tell me what's in season and what I have to do.
Absolutely. Let me know when you're here, and I'll let you know what adventure is on tap when you're here.
I will, for sure. Well, thank you, Becky, for sharing your life, your leadership journey, your insights. It is an amazing story.
Thanks for having me, Seth. This was a pleasure.
The stories we share here on the Halting Winter Podcast are part of something bigger, a movement to remind us where government truly lives. No, not in Washington, D.C., but right here at home, where we live, where we work, and where we play. Because it's in our cities, our counties, and our communities that the real work of democracy happens. And when local government thrives, people thrive. If this conversation inspired you, take a small step that makes a big difference. Subscribe to the podcast, share the episode, and follow along on social media. Every click helps amplify the stories that build pride, purpose, and belonging in local government. To learn more about the Halting Winter Project and how you can be part of the work that builds belonging, visit HaltingWinter.com. I'm Seth Winterhalter, and until next time, this has been the Halting Winter Podcast.